So let's ask a simple but ridiculously broad question. What's the church's role in culture? Or maybe we could put it another way, and maybe we're going to decide those are two very different questions. What is the church's job in equipping its members to carry out their callings in the world?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to ask what we mean by church and culture. Culture, we could probably assume we all agree, generally speaking, means the myriad callings that we have as husbands, fathers, mothers, daughters, wives, extended family, plumbers, teachers, and so forth. All of the myriad callings that we have make up culture, which another topic is we reduce everything to politics. Yeah. But in any case, all those callings that are rooted in creation. And then we have another calling rooted in the Great Commission. And when we talk about the church's role in ... I think we often assume that we all agree on what that means. And I think there's a tendency to assume that when we say the church, we mean all the born-again Christians. When I believe that the church is both an organization and an organism. We both draw on Kuyper there. It is an institution, and as an institution, it has a very limited calling, the Great Commission. But then Christians have a calling, myriad callings, in culture. So I would say the church, as an institution, doesn't have any calling to transform culture. It has a calling to dispense the means of grace, to preach the gospel, the law and the gospel, to minister the sacraments, church discipline, the diaconate, to care for the physical welfare of the people, the flock. But then resalinated, I think of the church as a resalination plant, resalted. The church as a people is then scattered into the world to pursue the various callings.
Okay, Matt, what would you say?
Well, let me ask a clarifying, so the mission of the church, we put it simply, is to proclaim the good news and make disciples.
Right.
Okay. The question I have when it comes to culture and where we would go is that part of that disciple-making process is training and releasing those men and women. Part of making disciples is empowering them to be a faithful presence within the domains of society that they are. So I want our firefighters to understand, our policemen to understand, our businessmen to understand, our not a lot of agriculture at the village, not a lot of farmers and ranchers, but want to empower them and turn them loose to see their neighborhood, their hobby, their workplace, that all those little units that they do life in, as really growing in their following of Christ by being a faithful presence and a faithful witness in that, and then even at times kind of rallying around a certain domain. So we would send we get a big group of our firefighters, and they go to Guatemala and they train Guatemalan firefighters and preach the gospel while they're there, and then we've done some things like that with police officers.
So you mean literal firefighters? For a minute,
yes.
I thought it,
no, it wasn't. I wasn't.
I thought it was just a name for. Never mind.
Oh, like the flames of hell firefighters.
No, you mean real firefighters?
Yeah, like legitimate firefighters.
Sorry, but I was 30 seconds. I was out of it. So.
Okay, no, you're all right. That might have been the first time Tim Keller's ever been out of it.
Yeah,
maybe. So that's kind of how that would be my question. I don't want to. I think what ends up happening when you start saying the mission of the church is to proclaim the gospel and make disciples, or to make disciples, is that somehow that kind of outside of the walls of the church isn't about becoming a disciple anymore, but what disciple making's about, training in the church, and so I think that's always been a concern of mine in this discussion, is somehow discipleship is imparting knowledge to a person, and I just think it goes beyond that, and so we want to engage in those domains.
Am I hearing this right? This is very interesting. I mean, you probably aren't practicing things that much differently, but I think I hear Michael saying, let's not say the church has any responsibility to transform culture. And I hear Matt saying, well, but if you make disciples and you're showing them that being a disciple means not only what you do inside the church but outside, aren't you actually saying, yes, it is our job to equip people to transform culture, though not directly as an institution to be trying to transform culture? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think, see, it becomes muddy, and this is where there's so much tension on this issue of, for the city, that's Walter Washington, everything wants to go back to the social gospel, but I don't think that that's what we're doing here.
I may be just a typical wishy-washy person here. I actually hear you saying the same thing, but not wanting to say it the same way. I mean, I hear you doing the same thing, and admitting that, no, it's not the church's job as the church to be trying to change the social structures. It's the job of the church to equip people, make them disciples, assume that when they go out there, if they're doing their callings, it's going to make a difference.
Yes.
So you could say, it's not my job as the pastor directly to lead a church to change culture, but to create culture-changing people.
There you go.
But now, and yet, I think Michael's probably saying, but I hear so much bleed into mission and transformation of culture being the mission of the church, that he's really afraid of that happening and he wants to guard it. So I don't hear you being on really very separate pages, and maybe we still won't agree on what we actually say publicly, but I think we're pretty close.
That's why I think a lot of it turns on the definition of the church.
Yeah.
Whether, now are you talking about the church as an institution, or the Christians out in the world in their calling, shaken out of the salt shaker into the world, pursuing their callings? And I think politics is the most obvious place to go here. How do you? I've been asked to sign two different statements on global climate change. One radically dismissive, I think pretty radically dismissive of a lot of data. And then another one sort of all embracing of that data, both from evangelicals who have a fairly similar view of the urgency and importance of creation stewardship. And I have friends in Washington who are on the Democrat side of the aisles and the Republican side of the aisle, and they have the same theology. They really do believe, they're both pro-life.
They're coming to different conclusions about what to do out in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And if the church gets involved at the level that a lot of churches have in sort of being the Republican Party at prayer or the Democratic Party at prayer, is the church losing its authority to address even the issues that God's Word does address, like life and
I agree.
Justice.
That is a problem. In fact, one step further, maybe this is when we're pastors, so that one of the problems with signing something, in the past I've actually had a number of places where I've said, I'm signing this as an individual Christian.
Yeah.
I'm not signing this as a representative of not only my own congregation, but not even my denomination. I'm not saying that the church as the church should be teaching this. I'm saying as an individual Christian, I get resources out of my faith for believing this is a good policy. I actually don't think I've been successful. I feel that when I sign it as a pastor, I do represent the institutional church. Nobody's really allowing me to be a member of the organic church. They won't let me. What it's really trying to say is, you are Presbyterian Church in America, you're Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and therefore you believe this about climate change. It is not the job of the church to be preaching about climate change, because I don't think the Bible speaks to it, frankly. It doesn't speak to it directly enough that everybody can agree on what we should do now in 2011. So I'm totally in agreement with Michael, and I even wonder whether I'm even able as a pastor to even not represent the institutional church. So we have to be so careful about political involvement in that way.
Yeah.